weather and all kinds of other callings of, that make it difficult to come all the way down to FLAD. FLAD, so I would like to first of all thank FLAD for hosting us here. FLAD are close and active partners, and we're absolutely thrilled to work with FLAD and with Michael Baum, one of the 3 executive directors of FLAD, who will be moderating tonight. We also have sponsors, as most of you know, the Bell Group, a very rapidly growing Portuguese industrial group, CAISO, the Carlucci American International School, and JTH, a tax advisory firm that are faithful sponsors. So, without taking any more time, other than once again thanking FLAD, let me introduce my friend Michael Baum, who is going to handle the rest of the introduction.
Well, this is a nice, cozy group, so it seems kind of silly for me to use the podium. I think I'll just get to the meat of it. First of all, Patrick, thanks for the kind words. Here at FLAD, we're very, very happy to always be a strong supporter of the American Club and everything that they do. And tonight's another good example of the kinds of events that you guys have been doing with increasing frequency. And tonight's just a little bit unfortunate with the weather, and parking around here doesn't make it so easy. In any case, I can just say that for those of you who don't know, the Luso-American Development Foundation is a private philanthropic organization that has this kind of unusual position in Portuguese society in that it has both American members on the board. I happen to be one of the 3, and then 2 other members nominated by the government of the day. And our mission is basically to build bridges between the US and Portugal in education and science and technology, in entrepreneurship, and all sorts of other areas. So we're narrow in terms of just US-Portugal, but we're broad in terms of the kinds of areas and things that we do. And tourism is certainly something that, that we obviously the D in our name is development. So as a major export industry for Portugal, it's certainly something that we're all interested in here. One of the programs that I oversee at FLAD is the Study in Portugal Network, which is a study abroad program that brings US students here. And what we're seeing, is a lot of them are coming back after a period of inactivity, and they're talking to their parents, because clearly, Portugal is now on everybody's radar in the United States. So I think part of what we do is also maybe feeding into some of what we're going to hear tonight. So I think we changed the order. So Sheree is going to be going first. So, and I think you all know Sheree very well already, but for those who don't, she's a Florida native. She's traveled over 45 countries, lived on 3 continents, speaks English, Spanish, Portuguese, and some Italian. She's president of Immersa Global, which is the first 100% American-owned boutique tour operator in Portugal that specializes in designing and executing very unique and exclusive travel experiences for discerning US clients. She's considered a thought leader in highly curated theme-based travel, and she's often engaged to provide insight for international travel media, as well as industry conferences, trade shows, and publications. She's also president of the Portugal chapter for ASTA, which is the American Society of Travel Advisors, where she leverages her connections to increase trade and industry awareness between the 2 countries. She was also recently named to the highly competitive Travel and Leisure A-list as one of the world's top travel experts in 22. During the pandemic, she began exploring the unique roles of tour operators and travel advisors as agents of change within the context of environmentally and socially sustainable tourism, which I'm very eager to hear about from her tonight, because that's also what we're trying to do more of with our Study Abroad program. And the recently launched IG for Good program is Immersa Global's contribution to this initiative. During her free time, she's also a passionate advocate for international education, global citizenship, and female entrepreneurship, of which she is a perfect example. And she also uses her international platform to increase visibility for marginalized groups. Her favorite saying is, "Be daring enough to dream big and resilient enough to make it happen." So, welcome. Thank you, Sheree.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good evening. It's so good to be here, glad. It's been a while. This is such a lovely building, and I hope that you guys get a chance to see it in the daylight sometimes. The garden's absolutely stunning. It feels like we're back at home, so thank you so much for opening your doors to us. 2 years ago, July 2022, we had the first version of the current state of tourism via Zoom, and we did everything we possibly could to convey as much positivity and optimism during that time. There were 5 of us who were speaking. Luis Araújo, who's the president of Turismo Portugal, the National Tourism Authority, was one of our headliners at that time. And each one of us tried to convey as much positivity as possible. I revisited that webinar a couple of days ago in preparation for tonight, and I can tell you that I could only watch about 2 minutes of it. We talked about everything that was happening in 2020 in July, so you can only imagine what the main topics were. I'm so happy to say that we have survived the worst of the COVID's effects on the tourism industry, and we are here to give you a much more positive message tonight. Still some things that we can work on, but definitely not what we were discussing in 2020. So thank you so much for returning. Many of you guys were on that webinar with us 2 years ago, so I hope that this evening is a much more optimistic message. So let's get started. I'm going to give you all just some observations from my world as a destination management company owner and also operator, if you will. I have a couple of goals with this presentation. I want to invite you guys into the world of DMCs, give you all some information on Immersa Global's client profile so you can understand the following information, which is designing tourism products in Portugal, and also to speak about some of the challenges and opportunities that I'm seeing from my perspective. So a destination management company, it's a term that you don't hear very often outside of the tourism industry. It's a professional management company that specializes in design and delivery of events, activities, tours, staffing, transportation, utilizing extensive local knowledge, expertise, resources, and I must add, a really strong local network of amazing professionals here in Portugal that we invite into our programs. So to break down kind of our position and where we are in supply chain for tourism, this is a very simplified version. I'm actually a little embarrassed for Adolfo and Arnie to see this. Destination management companies work directly with what I consider the core suppliers, the hotels, the F&B, the restaurants and beverage suppliers, transportation and tour guides. And we are the agency that contracts directly with these suppliers. We then package the products to sell to American travel agencies, in our case American, since that's our main market, who then resell those products onto their clients, who are the actual end consumer or the end user of this product. This is the B2B model, and then the B2C model is very similar, except for it does not have the travel agency component, and in this case, the DMC is working as a vendor and selling directly to the end consumer. There are pros and cons to both. So for Immersa Global, our clients are all considered high net worth individuals from the U.S. Median income is well over 125,000 USD per year. Their ages range between 35 and 70. They're all well-traveled. Comfort is the top priority for all of them, and the focus is on experience and never on price. So this map represents the areas, or the circles in the map represent the areas where Immersa Global's clients spend the majority of their time when they're in Portugal. They either arrive in Porto or in Lisbon, and depending on the type of product that we've created for them or the theme that they are interested in exploring during their time in Portugal, they will go to the Alentejo, and most recently we've added my new love, Madeira, or Madeira Island, to the portfolio as well. Now, on the other side of this, it would be left for me, maybe right for you. We have what I consider the hierarchy of needs when we are designing products. And so lodging is by far the most important element in our clients' programs. We absolutely must get the hotels right for them. And there's a whole process of how we arrive to that. F&B offerings are also very important. And so as long as where they're sleeping and where they're eating and what they're eating is on point for them, then they are usually really happy campers. The other two points that we have to consider are exactly where they're going and what they're doing, and that is all determined by the different themes that the clients are exploring in Portugal. And then the travel time from point A to point B. And even though our clients do not drive themselves, they're being driven around the country with really lovely drivers and nice cars, you still don't want to be stuck in a car for 2 or 3 hours every single day. So that's something that we have to take in consideration. And recently, we're hearing more requests for information about the sustainability initiatives of not just Immersa Global itself as the partner for the travel agencies or the direct vendor to the clients. We're also hearing or receiving questions about what our suppliers are doing. So clients are actually asking, the hotel that you're selecting for us, will it be a sustainable hotel? Or can you give us more information on the social initiatives that these suppliers are engaged in? And I hope that if we have a current state of tourism 3.0, I'll be able to tell you that this is a top priority for our clients. And here are just some images of my absolute favorite part of what I do when I get to travel around Portugal and seek of these amazing experiences. It's a hard job, but I really enjoy it. Now, all of our programs include these 8 elements here. Oops, let's go back to that. All of our programs include these 8 elements here. The most important one for me personally, and especially with some of the objectives that I've always had when even conceiving the idea of starting a DMC in Portugal, was to be able to connect. So the personalized experiences with local experts, which is third from the last, is the ultimate element that we're able to incorporate in these programs, and our clients receive very well. And there's an image at the bottom of the slide that corresponds to a fun experience with wine tours from Sonoma Valley. They live in the Bay Area specifically, and they came to Portugal, and we connected them with a young winemaker in central Portugal who does not even produce enough wine yet to sell in other parts of the country, much less being able to sell in the U.S. So this was a really special experience for them because it's unique, and they probably would not have been able to find this on their own. Another really interesting and exclusive experience that we've had is working with well-known people, especially between Portugal and the U.S., and we've had the opportunity to curate a program with the former U.S. ambassador to Portugal. And this was more geared towards business travelers or people who were interested in economic opportunities in Portugal or business opportunities in Portugal. We've also had the opportunity to serve as the liaison and also the facilitator between the city of Miami Beach and the municipality of Cascais. And so they are now officially sister cities thanks to Immersa Global's intervention in connecting the two. And this was in December of 2019. So now that we have gone over a couple of elements of what a DMC does and specifically how we're working in Portugal to promote Portugal in the US, I invite you all for 2 minutes to join me as we travel around the country.
You don't really know a country until you truly understand its soul.
My name is Sheree Mitchell. I'm inviting you to the most exclusive, the most unique, the most authentic travel experience into the very heart and soul of Portugal. Portugal.
A tailor-made cultural experience where the best-kept secrets are meant to be discovered, enjoyed, treasured. Hand-picked places, highly curated local experiences, and a heart-driven European destination.
Trendy, elegant, fun.
This is the absolute best side of Portugal. A journey personally designed for you to truly travel, connect, experience.
Welcome home to Portugal.
Every time I watch that, I remind myself of just how fortunate it is to live in such a beautiful and delicious country. So now I'd like to transition to some of the new requests and new consumer behavior that we are noticing from our clients with regards to how they're traveling in 2022 or how they've traveled in 2022 and how they are expecting to travel in 2023. We're noticing now that Portugal's being requested as a single destination, whereas before it was always an add-on to an existing trip to Europe. We would have clients request 4 or 5 days in Lisbon on their way back to the US from Paris or from Barcelona. We would always try to encourage them to spend more time here. But now, this is happening naturally. We've noticed that clients are requesting more experiences in the countryside. They're actually able to mention regions within Portugal. The Alentejo's Tourism Board has been doing an amazing job, I suppose, at promoting itself. So people are asking for it by name. They're also asking for spending more time in the Douro, in the Down. Longer stays. We are curating our first programs of 30 days plus for families or for groups of couples. We're noticing that there are former COVID pods, and that was a term we used a lot in the US during the height of COVID, where people would decide to only spend time with each other so that they could minimize the risk of contaminating COVID or spreading COVID amongst their friends and family members. But some of these COVID pods have turned into travel groups. And so we are receiving multiple COVID pods, which would be 3 or 4 or 5 different couples who are traveling together. Detailed questions about local healthcare system here in Portugal is another novelty that we've noticed this year, where people are actually asking. And when they find out that I'm American, they really want to know, comparing what is it like between the U.S., what were your experiences like going to a doctor for something simple as, a common cold or flu, and comparing your experience in the U.S. versus Portugal. We're receiving questions about Portugal's response, national response during the pandemic, and how the local people here were taken care of or looked after. And this is always a conversation that I enjoy having as a proud expat living in Portugal, and being able to tell people that there were points throughout the pandemic where Portugal basically expanded coverage, healthcare coverage, to absolutely everyone without asking any questions whatsoever of their residency status. Right? And we get questions sometimes about Immersa Global's response to 2 years of very little business. And I'm always proud to say we survived. Here we are, and we're ready to work with you. So some of the current challenges and what I also would like to consider future opportunities. Consistency in suppliers, products, and services was a challenge prior to COVID, and it continues to be a challenge now, and it's actually quite exaggerated now. So we're seeing lots of inconsistency with some of our suppliers' products and services, which is very unfortunate because it's difficult to continue to build on your foundation if you cannot completely rely on your suppliers' performance on a daily basis. And with the type of clients that we have, they are very sensitive to lack of consistency, especially if we have explained to them in detail what type of experience you're going to have, what is exactly what they expect or better. We're noticing that there's a shortage of high-end products and services in the market. Michael and I were talking before the presentation about reaching out to suppliers for transportation, and the suppliers simply saying, we are completely out of stock. We have no drivers, we have no cars, no vans, no buses or anything. So that might be an opportunity if there's anyone who's interested in investing in that particular area of the sector. we're also noticing, everyone's noticing, the shortage of trained workers in the hospitality sector. Is this better? Thank you. The shortage of trained workers in the hospitality sector as well. And this is obviously a problem that's affecting all of us, not just those who are working in tourism, but also consumers such as you all. And I have here just 2 images from local news and local tourism publication that speaks to these issues. What I would like to highlight is that the Tourism Authority in the Algarve have been very creative. They're actually seeking solutions to the problem of the shortage of staff in other countries. So I'll have to follow this and see if they're successful with it, because it could possibly be a solution for other areas of Portugal as well. And that is the end of what I wanted to share with you guys. The idea was to serve as a bridge. Our original lineup was a little different than how we're presenting tonight, but the idea was to serve as a bridge between our 2 main speakers this evening, to give you some information on the ground, what it's been like in Portugal as a destination management company or tour operator, some of the challenges that we're noticing that will help to contextualize our other speakers' presentations and contributions to this very important discussion. If you have any questions, I will be around for the remainder of this evening. I'll be happy to speak with you after the session. And if you'd like to connect with me on social media, this is my LinkedIn profile and name. Thank you so much.
Should I follow the original order? Adolfo next, and then Arnie at the end? Okay, all right. we changed it up a little bit, so let me just, let me introduce good friend Adolfo Mesquita Nunes, who I think also, given the fact that he's a public figure here in Portugal, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know, but in any case, he is actually a lawyer and partner of a boutique law firm called Gama Gloria. He specializes in regulation, public policy, and procurement, and administrative litigation. He's a member of the arbitration panel of the Administrative Arbitration Center, or CAD. He also teaches public management at the Nova School of Business and Economics, and he's on the board at Galp, which I did not know, and one of the biggest companies listed on the Portuguese stock index. He consults for private and public clients across a variety of industry sectors. Over the last year, he's assisted several clients on a wide range of matters in the areas of electric mobility, electronic platforms, public contracts, the waste sector, and others. He's a 40 under 40 young leader. He also happens to be the former Secretary of State for Tourism during the governments that had a tough road to hoe during the period of the Eurozone crisis from 13 to 15. He also was a member of Parliament from 2011 until 2013. During his tenure as Secretary of State, he led the deregulation of the tourism sector, including short-term rentals, travel agencies, the sharing economy, and online gaming. As I mentioned, he's a known public figure, publishes widely, weekly commentator on TV, and he recently published a book on globalization, challenges and opportunities. So very happy to have you here, Adolfo, finally at our house.
Okay, thank you.
Nice to have you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here, to be in FLAD. It is indeed a wonderful building. The first time I was here, it was a long time ago. I was selected for the German Marshall Fund, which is a huge commitment of FLAD with the United States, and I had the opportunity to travel in the United States for 3.5 weeks, from Black Hills, South Dakota, to Chicago, Washington, New York, and Portland. So it was one of the best experiences in my life, and I went back to the United States several times for work. And since we are in the midterm elections period of time, my law firm is associate of the Albright Stonebridge Group. So the last time I was in Washington, I met with Madeleine Albright, who sadly passed away this year. And I wanted to mention her name in this period of time. I miss those times where those figures were in politics and were much more inspiring than the ones we have today. I can so relate what you were saying and showing about Portugal. For 3 years, I did that job. It is the best portfolio in the government, even in a period of crisis. So if you ever have the chance to be in the government, pick the tourism portfolio. It's the best job. And selling the country was probably the thing that I enjoyed most in my lifetime until now. So I will try to do the same here, and but I will try to tell you a little bit more about my country apart from the tourism. One of the things that I noticed when I arrived to the government is that we were a wonderful destination with wonderful professionals, wonderful infrastructures, wonderful hotels, wonderful experiences for tourists, but we were not communicating. We were not known at the time. So my priority was, let's reshape the way we communicate. The tools and the message. The tools we got fully digital. We were fully non-digital. And it was a successful effort. We managed to reach much more people in a more segmented way, entailing some conversations that we never had before with tourists. And then the content about Portugal. I have to do this. So my idea at the time was that Portugal should not promote itself as a touristic destination, but much more than that. You need to be more credible, you need to be more consistent, more coherent. So no country is a good touristic destination if it's not a good place to live, to work, to invest, to marry, to divorce, to have the first love experience, etc. So our idea was, let's not talk about Portugal as a touristic destination, but we're a place where it's good to come, to stay, and to live. And this made us define a strategy from agriculture to wines, from universities to startup scene, a message that could be coherent about this. That's why we brought Web Summit here. It was consistent with our idea of a country that was booming, a country that was fighting and finding a way to get out of the crisis, the country where everything can be tested and done. So our idea was, let's give the touristic speech a rest, and let's talk about Portugal, what we do. And that's why I wanted to say that, of course, this is the quality of life. It's a great place to live. It's one of the healthiest places to live. It's one of the best quality of life for expats. Europe's leading destination, world's leading destination. We have been having all these awards. But none of these could be consistent if we cannot have much more to present to foreigners. So, I'm sorry.
The thing can be tricky.
Yeah, I'm just... Okay, here I am. So of course the fact that Portugal is a safe and expat-friendly country with reliable institutions, we have rule of law, we have regulatory quality, we have government effectiveness, we have political stability, we have control of corruption, we are in the second safest European country, the fourth safest globally, top 10 European country for foreign direct investment, best quality of life in Europe for expats, and fifth globally. So this is the start of the conversation. This is a safe and expat-friendly country with reliable institutions. You can stay here, not just visit and go away as soon as a problem comes. It is also an ideal place to expand to the world. Because of our location, our time zone, we are easy to connect. We have also a huge effort on building more connections from Portugal and to Portugal. And we have now easier air and sea connection, and we can have business with everywhere in the world because of our time zone. You can talk and email and chat with everyone, no matter where that people is in the world. And in what concerns infrastructures, we are a top-performing country. We either in the digitalization index, in the ultra-fast fixed broadband take-up, the communications technology, but also the highways and the infrastructures we have. We are very well known, or maybe we do not know and we do not appreciate what we have, but in what concerns infrastructures, we are in fact top performing. And some of the Portuguese don't know, and the foreigners also, that Portugal, the English Proficiency Index 2021, Portugal is on top 10. We have the expat tax regime, the tech visa, I will mention that later, but this is an innovative ecosystem that was built from that period on and went on with the following governments about having education and talent, management education, language skills, university education, startup and tax ecosystem, and great place for business. We are improving our talent competitiveness ranking, etc., etc., etc. So this is to say that we wanted to present Portugal as a place that is safe, it's reliable, you can invest, and you can easily be understood here. But I think that nowadays the main questions is, what about the crisis? What about what is going on in the world? And I would say that, of course, it's hard to predict anything nowadays. It's totally temporary to foresee for 6 months. But we know that Portugal has specific conditions that make us be less pessimistic compared to other economies. If we look at the top 5 European economies, Germany is about to enter into recession. Italy is in recession. UK is in recession. So in this period, can we be optimistic? Can we still sell Portugal? Do we have any economic advantage to present? And I will get to tourism later. First, I would say the GDP, the foreign direct investment, and our energy mix are 3 main reasons for Portugal to be in a better position than some other economies in Europe. Portugal is expected to grow at a faster pace than the euro area in 2022. This is the expectancy of the growth in 2022. Portugal is expected to grow 6.3. The euro area 2.8. And also in 2023 and 24, we are keeping the pace with the euro area. We have now recovered from the pre-pandemic situation. Countries like Spain are still about to recover, maybe next year. So in this sense, Portugal is growing. We could be, of course, growing more, especially because I do not support usually the government, but in this sense, I would say that this is our good figures. And we are a stable Western European economy because we have the euro stability. The GDP has been consistent, and the unemployment rate. And in tourism, one of the problems we have is precisely the opposite. We have jobs and no people coming to get those jobs. The second thing that I would like to mention to explain why Portugal is still is in a good position is that in 2021 we had the highest number of foreign direct investment projects ever in Portugal. We attracted to 100, a 30% increase compared to the ones announced in 2020. And we have, in the first half, we are much more in a better position. And this foreign direct investment is with the United States in the first position. So the European Union counts with 75% of share, of course, but when we take country by country, the United States is the biggest economy investing in foreign direct investment in Portugal, 15%, exactly with Germany. The main areas are software and IT services, transportation, manufacturers and suppliers and transportation, and logistics. I will briefly go to that a little bit afterwards. And these are the areas that I mentioned, so it's a repetitive slide. The third condition that I think that Portugal can present to the world is that our energetic mix is not dependent on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Well, the Russian war invasion, but the Russia-Ukraine situation. Our energetic mix, oil and gas, is not dependent on these two countries. And this keeps the Portuguese economy, and inflation shows that, compared especially with the other countries or our neighbor Spain, shows that we are more resilient to this situation. So this is to say that even in this period of time, I think that Portugal presents those competitive advantages. And is in fact becoming increasingly attractive for technology-based development. This is our figures and the way we are creating unicorns, a small economy like Portugal, especially in the tech area. Farfetch, Feeds Systems, Remotes, World Health, and Talkdesk are the Portuguese tech unicorns. We are about to have one or two more next year. In several areas, the startup scene is in the artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, e-commerce, Internet of Things, mobility and connectivity, and fintech. So startup scene related to the digital economy and not to the classical economy, which shows that we are, with the talent we have, we are going for where the economy is needing. And also international companies come to Portugal to establish tech centers and build up engineering teams. We have some of these examples. I cannot talk much because I work for them, but we have Cloudflare, Jumia, Pipedrive, Klarna, Revolut, TripAdvisor, Vidzai, or Applied Blockchain. They all chose Portugal in the recent months and to establish, months or years, to establish themselves in Portugal. Why do I say this? We have been working with some US-based companies launching their businesses in Portugal, and what they mention precisely is the talent we have, so the possibility they have to hire people in the engineering sectors, the possibility to have not a very simple or liberal, but still stable and understandable labor legislation, a tax regime that is very, very attractive to foreign direct investments, and also the possibility to test things in Portugal. We are early adopters in what concerns everything that is new. That's why some companies that have a lot of problems in other countries, here they started their businesses in a more peaceful and calm way. So, and they all mention that they chose Portugal because our economic stability conditions, the way we, unfortunately, a bad reason, but good for them, low-cost workforce, but skilled workforce. So real estate is also usually a topic in this kind of presentations. It's 15% of our GDP. I forgot to mention about the tourism GDP is more or less the same, and our economy relies so much in tourism that it protects us nowadays. The pandemic is over. It protects us also. It gives strength to our economy, and we still have in Portugal high attractiveness for growth and development in this area. The residential tourism is still very important segment because we are still attracting, because of this and because of the tourism, a lot of people to live here. Our main city centers still have a high number of buildings needed to be rehabilitated, and we have a huge problem of supply. The demand is 10 times greater than the supply of new homes, so there is a huge opportunity in Portugal in the real estate development, especially if you look for the new sustainability and innovation concepts all around the world, where Portugal is eager to have. And economic priorities and incentives to foreign investment. The Portuguese state and government has several transnational mobility programs, the tech visa, the startup visa, now the digital nomads visa, apart from the golden visa that we have already, which means that our state is eager to welcome not only tourists, but citizens and investors. This is a stable political trend. it started in the former governments and kept on in these governments, is all over the main parties in Portugal. And we have three general tax incentives: the non-permanent residence tax regime, the CFID, which is for the investment in high tech, and the international investment tax regime. And we have the real estate tax incentives that some of you must know. So before saying thank you, what I tried to say here today is that Portugal is much more than the best touristic destination. And is only the best touristic destination because somehow we managed, as a country, to have coherent policies from one party to the other that were consistent in trying to show that Portugal is the best place to stay, to live, and to fall in love, as you did. So I'm pretty proud to see your video, and I hope to see more of Portugal in your videos. We have much more still to show, but the fact that that I tried to give you a broader picture is not only because I don't trust about our touristic skills and resources and abilities. I knew that subject would be covered, but to show you that for us, as a political, consistent way, we have been building a country where it's much more than a touristic destination. Thank you very
much. Well, Arnie Weissmann, where to start? This is, I just want to make sure I have...
You don't have to read it all.
So, Arnie, it's a pleasure to have you here. He's editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly and executive vice president and editorial director for its parent company, North Star Travel Group. It's the largest business-to-business travel media company in the world, serving audiences in the Americas, Asia, and Europe. His involvement with travel journalism began in consumer media, publishing articles in dozens of outlets from the Washington Post to the LA Times. He entered business-to-business publishing, launching the travel industry's first destination information service, the Weissmann Travel Reports, providing frequently updated unbiased profiles on every country in the world. And this has since been incorporated into the North Star product. He's regularly seen on PBS as a contributor to the television program The Travel Detective. His commentary has also appeared on CBS, NBC, ABC, and many, many other outlets. He's been quoted in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and he's frequently been a speaker at the CES, the World Economic Forum, and Microsoft Envision. He also is a repeat guest lecturer at the Cornell University School of Hotel Administration. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Arnie, and we're eager to hear what you have to share with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sheree and Patrick and Michael and the Lisbon Club, the American Club of Lisbon for inviting me, and Flyat for hosting us here today. Happily, this is my third visit to Portugal since I was fully vaccinated. And as Adolfo mentioned, tourism now contributes approximately 15% of Portugal's GDP. And that additionally, the U.S. is one of the top 5 markets, inbound markets to Portugal. And I think both those numbers, the GDP and U.S.'s rank among the most popular visitation will rise when the 2022 numbers are tallied. Going back. There we go. So this past July, 183,000 Americans visited Portugal, and they made the U.S. not number 5, but number 3 in arrivals that month, behind only Spain and the U.K., and it represented almost 36% increase over that same month in 2019, which had been the record-setting year. And it wasn't just Americans heading to Portugal. July was the best month for tourism in Portugal ever. Almost every country increased visitation in Portugal this year, many by double digits. And the only exception to that among frequent visitors was Germany. So, is this the new normal? Can Portugal depend on this explosive growth in tourism to continue next year and beyond? I think it will continue to grow, but not necessarily at this rate. I see 2022 as a transitional year impacted by several factors that combine to create a strong showing of Americans. So these are the factors: pent-up demand, strong dollar versus the euro, an increase in direct flights, the relaxation of COVID protocols and simplification of entry requirements, and Portugal's perceived safety vis-a-vis Ukraine. So let's look at these one at a time. So pent-up demand. This, I think, is having the strongest impact of all, and I think it's unlikely that Americans will continue to travel in these numbers if the current environment continues with its higher than normal airfares, sky-high average hotel daily rates, and costly car rental fees. These have risen in response to a combination of factors, including high demand and the cost of fuel and wages. Still, in addition to costly airfares, American travelers this year seem to be willing to put up with long lines at airports, delayed flights, and lost baggage. And once they arrive, they frequently find, as both Adolfo and Sheree had mentioned, subservice standard due to staffing shortages. And bear in mind that these record-breaking numbers of arrivals are occurring without the Chinese. When they return, their pent-up demand after years of severe lockdowns will be even stronger. So the good news is the fact that travelers are willing to put up with all of this in 2022, it demonstrates how powerful travel and tourism has become. People have come to view leisure travel as a right to be exercised as soon as time and discretionary income allow. So even if this were to turn out to be an exceptional one-off year, investments in travels and tourism, notably the construction of hotels, are likely to pay off handsomely. Hospitality developers have taken notice of Portugal. In the second quarter alone, 123 new hotel construction projects began, which will add 15,000 rooms. 34 of those new builds are in Lisbon, accounting for 4,000 beds. Now keep in mind that 15,000 rooms have filled at 80% occupancy, which is typical, equals an additional 4,380,000 room nights in a year's time. A strong dollar. The dollar is now on par with the euro, and that doesn't translate into savings on airfare for Americans, but it certainly helps mitigate the cost of hotel stays and car rental rates. Globally, hotels are predicted to raise their rates at an average 13% in 2022 and are predicted to go up another 10% next year. Portugal benefits from the perception that as a destination it's a bargain. And in many areas, particularly food and wine, it is. But the perception is not actually realistic. Hotels are not the bargain they once were. In May, before the high summer season kicked in, Portugal's average daily rate of $142 a night was 15% higher than 2019, the benchmark year, and was higher than the average daily rate in Spain, the UK, Austria, and Germany. So inflation and high energy costs are very likely to continue to be worse in most of the Eurozone than in the US as long as the Ukraine war lasts. And for that period, it's very likely the dollar will maintain its strength against the euro. So the increase in airlift to Portugal has a couple of direct benefits, some of which would be felt regardless of the timing of when the routes entered the market, but some of which reflect the particularly good timing of this entry. So United, Delta, TAP, and SATA all increased the number of routes they're flying into the US this year. As regards the timing of these additional routes being added in 2022, it's very helpful. Non-stop flights, in addition to being generally more convenient, reduced by half the potential problems associated with Armageddon, which is the shorthand name for the tremendous problems in Europe's airports this past summer. With nonstop service, a delayed flight won't also result in a misconnection, and your luggage has a better chance of arriving with you since it didn't need to connect either. While fares are still higher than before, the increase in competition on routes to Portugal should result, generally speaking, in lower airfares. There are simply more seats to fill, and unless demand matches the supply immediately, there will be competitive pressure to lower these fares. And finally, when airlines send communications to their frequent flyers, they promote their new routes. I received this email from United, and the Azores were the lead destination mentioned. So European countries have relaxed COVID protocols for Americans, and I think the Azores may have been the last territory in Europe to drop the requirement. But there are still some Asian countries, most notably China, that are still off the traveler's map. And even in Japan, for example, which recently opened, there are still COVID-related forms to complete, similar to what all countries used to require, and which makes travel there more complicated, and it inhibits inbound travel. China's absence from the market reduces the competitive set of available international destinations, and those like Japan become less attractive when there's these sorts of additional complications to visitation. So Portugal is among a fairly large set of countries that share in the benefit of ease of entry. And finally, it doesn't hurt that Portugal is about as far from Ukraine as any country in continental Europe. While tourism in Eastern Europe and the Eastern Baltics have suffered since the Ukraine war began, those in Western Europe have not been badly impacted. So what are the factors that might impact tourism going forward? These are the possible headwinds. And the largest, in my estimation, are the continuing staff shortages that have been previously mentioned. I recently read an article by a professor at the Porto Business School saying Portugal has hardly escaped the impact of the Great Resignation. And it seems to be hitting tourism particularly hard, in part because so many people lost travel jobs during the pandemic and found other work. And to be frank, hotel service jobs are not particularly rewarding. The hours are irregular, the pay is often low, the work is often menial, and since many people were reevaluating their lives during the pandemic, hospitality and restaurant workers added up the pros and cons and decided a career change might be in order. There's an aspect of this that can be particularly disheartening for a traveler, and that is the disruption of existing relationships with hotel staffs. I wrote recently about one traveler who, to celebrate his 25th wedding anniversary, brought his whole family to celebrate with him and his wife at their favorite resort in Italy. Recalling the warm personal welcome and fine refreshments that always had greeted him, he told his family, just watch how he'd be welcomed. But check-in was impersonal and perfunctory, no welcome drink, no recognition. Before the pandemic, the staff had known what time to expect him to come down for breakfast and would have his almond milk cappuccino waiting. And when he came, but on this trip, it took 45 minutes to get the waiter's attention. The only one who did finally recognize him was the pool boy. And for this level of service, he was paying thousands of dollars a night. So much of why people return to a destination has to do with how people at the destination make them feel. The irony is that this enormous influx of Americans should be an opportunity for every country to show how welcoming they can be and to nurture repeat business. But I fear that with the disruption of existing relationships and the inability of properties and attractions to form meaningful new ones, some of the opportunity of 2022 will be lost. A related issue is that in some destinations, over-tourism has returned with a vengeance, particularly in Europe. Despite steps taken to mitigate over-tourism during the pandemic, places like Venice and Amsterdam and Barcelona, and perhaps you've seen places in Portugal, are not just overcrowded, they're overwhelmed. And as I mentioned, this is before the Chinese and other Asian travelers have hit the road again. Although money concerns haven't kept American travelers away, inflation fears have certainly been the biggest focus in the debates leading up to today's election in the U.S. The good news is that unemployment is currently at record lows, and as long as people are employed, they tend to keep traveling. But if inflation worries build, that certainly could have an impact on where and how they travel in 2023. And finally, the pandemic. The World Health Organization has not yet said that the COVID-19 pandemic is over. For the moment, I think the attitude of most of the world is that the virus may not be done with us, but we're done with the virus. As long as symptoms are mild for most people and the vulnerable are protected, we're putting most health protocols behind us. Still, cold weather is approaching, which usually leads to surges, and there's always the possibility the virus may mutate into a more serious form. Hopefully that is a headwind that does not materialize. I'd like to end with an observation about the travel industry overall and how it's survived the pandemic. You may recall in February of this year, the ship the Endurance, which had been crushed by Antarctic ice flows in 1915, had been found in the frigid Weddell Sea in surprisingly good shape. The story behind the Endurance and of how over the course of 17 months, all 28 of the crew managed to survive and ultimately be rescued is a story of unbelievable resourcefulness, courage, and leadership. Last month, I read the book Endurance by Alfred Lansing. It's a fascinating read, more suspenseful and inspiring than any book of fiction you might pick up, and it's well written too. And as I was reading it, I couldn't help but see parallels between the pandemic and this shipwreck as regards travel. For the first 10 months after the ship became stuck in the ice, the crew was essentially on a form of lockdown. Going nowhere, they set up camp on the ice next to their ship, which was slowly being crushed by the ice floes. After it sank, they set up another camp on the ice for an additional 5 months, including the dark Antarctic winter. They had hoped the ice floes they were on would drift closer to land or an island where they could launch 3 open boats that they had salvaged, but open water evaded them, and even as the ice began to melt under them, they faced likely death. Now, I won't go into all the riveting details about Captain Ernest Shackleton. His leadership and the crew's perseverance and resourcefulness, I feel that the travel business, whose continued viability seemed to be in question during the pandemic, showed a resiliency and a will to survive that is also uplifting. The pandemic affected most industries, for better or worse, but the battle to survive that travel companies, large and small, fought in business rather than nautical terms was a demonstration of endurance and ingenuity that I still find inspiring. It's an industry that may be impacted by a wide range of circumstances, a health crisis, civil or political disturbance, acts of terrorism, natural disasters, yet it learns and becomes stronger and more resilient from each and every challenge. As you might have surmised, I don't take this year's record-breaking visitation and profits for granted or assume we're completely out of the woods yet, but I have seen what this industry is capable of in the most challenging crisis since World War II, and I have confidence that despite any speed bumps or even mountains that are ahead, it will continue to grow, innovate, and bring joy, inspiration, relaxation, and enlightenment to the people in this room and across the planet. Travel nurtures and facilitates the things we treasure in life. Time with family, the ability to immerse yourself in nature, adventure, great cuisine, exposure to the fine and performing arts. Travel is life amplified, and I found the travel industry to be a fascinating industry to cover. Having spent more than 40 years traveling and covering travel, I've come to believe that regardless of any challenges ahead, creative minds in the global travel industry will do their best to provide the experiences and memories that enhance life. Everything that has happened over the past 2.5 years has only reinforced that belief. So thank you very much.
So we have time for some questions, and then we'll get to the last moment, which will take us into dinner.
Yeah, this is a question for Arnie. Your 40 years of experience, you've seen, no doubt, how tourism is also subject to fashion. And, a country, a place becomes fashionable and then becomes less fashionable. And I'm wondering what your assessment might be on to what degree is Portugal benefiting from a fashion trend that might not last with as much intensity as is the case today with your 40 years of experience?
I think that when things come into fashion, unless they really blow it, they will remain with a healthy tourism industry. So when I say when they really blow it, there have been some destinations which let tourism kind of go forward unplanned. And when that happens, you end up seeing over-tourism of the worst sort, and then the reputation flips. It goes from being a very popular destination to one that you want to avoid, because there's so many choices these days. And one thing that has just been instrumental in what makes a destination fashionable lately is social media. And I mean, there's just stories and stories how if somebody takes a picture of something beautiful, everybody wants to see that exact same spot. And I think Portugal has benefited to some degree from that. But tourism, the tourism board, I think many of them actually bring influencers to come to destinations. And if the influencer is influential, it will be very good. It will be very positive. Very positive.
Part of the strategy is precisely bringing influencers to the country, and also journalists, not necessarily from travel magazines, but to travel all over the country and to tell about the story. And at the time, Portugal had a very good story to tell. We were in the middle of the crisis, so we had a huge thing to show about. And that strategy continues. But as you mentioned, social media means massification of the message, and the risk of over-tourism is always there. And the discussion is how to avoid over-tourism when you cannot forbid people to come. You cannot go to the airport and saying, how much do you earn and how much do you plan to spend here? If you cannot select that. You have to select the tourists with policies about their requalification, but still there is a degree of massification of the tourism that is here to stay. Middle class, affluent in the world that we hadn't before. Tourism is much more cultural now than it's not an event in our lifetime. It's a daily thing. So it's one of the, I agree with you, over-tourism is one of the issues we have, and it's not easy to tackle. Sorry.
Can I ask a question? All right, so I guess this is for Sheree and Adolfo. As an insider, I mean, I've been living off and on here now for 34 years. I've seen Portugal change dramatically, right? But, as a local now, I mean, what I hear a lot of local Portuguese feeling is tourism is great as an export industry, but when middle-class people can no longer afford to live in downtown Lisbon and downtown Porto, or even not just downtown, but starting to get out into the suburbs, I think a lot of people feel like, it's a tremendous pressure on what they envisioned for themselves and their children. And I guess this ties into, I'm a political scientist, so it ties into, I heard you mentioning, both of you, about the problem of low salaries in the tourism sector. And of course, if you follow market economics, you would think with an increase in demand and a lack of labor, there should be an increase in salary. But we're not, as far as I know, we're not really seeing that, particularly in the tourism sector. And so I guess it's two questions really embedded here. One, how do you think the government, are they doing enough to try and redirect tourism to the interior and to spread out tourism, right? So that there's not so much pressure on the two capital cities? And B, what are the factors that are not allowing salaries to rise the way that we might expect it to following market dynamics?
Okay, regarding housing, tourism is an easy and rather incomplete explanation for the prices of houses. If you look to what is happening in the world, you live in a world of cities. United Nations says that more than 80% of the population in 2015 will live in cities. So we are seeing a change because the economic sectors are no longer the agriculture or industry, which put people all over the territories, is services. And services are located in cities where everyone is going there, the brainstorming happens, everything is happening. So first is a movement, a natural movement of the inhabitants to live in cities. Then you have what the tourism brought of requalification of the city centers. Nowadays, everyone wants to live in the city center. No one wanted to live when I started in the government. If you go to the downtown in Lisbon, you see a totally different picture from 10 years ago. No one wanted to live there. Now everyone wants to live there. Third, we live in a global world, in a global economy. You cannot forbid foreigners to buy homes here. And international investment is a more stronger explanation for, rather than tourism, for what is happening in the prices, because the supply increased a lot with more affluent people who can spend more. And you cannot say to a French, because they are coming in waves, especially because their governments are taxing a lot the rich people, and they are coming to Portugal or other countries. You cannot say to a real estate owner, you cannot sell to a Frenchman, because you cannot sell for the higher price. You need to sell your real estate investment for a medium price. You cannot say that, at least in a democracy, in a global world. So you have this investment. And then you have the biggest problem that no one usually talks about, and I try to bring here, lack of supply. You need more houses. The rhythm of construction in Portugal is not coping at all with the rise of the demand. So if you have much more people wanting to buy houses and you have less construction, because you have all the not in my backyard crowd saying we need more houses but not here, you have a problem. And you have a problem that is felt in Amsterdam, in Copenhagen, in Malmö, in Stockholm. So it's a problem of the cities, regardless of the short-term rentals legislation they have, regardless of the rental market they have, they are all facing the same problem. It's much more structural than finding an explanation on the tourism. And the tourism is the sitting duck, unfortunately, and is the one easy to blame. And I always try to resist to that, and at least bring into the equation the need to build more houses and to cope with the supply. But it's a cultural thing. And one of the risks of the tourism sector nowadays, I don't know if the same happens in other countries, is the politicization of the public policies regarding tourism. It's easy now to say, let's forbid short-term rentals, let's forbid tourists to come. And suddenly the tourists are the ones to blame. And this is regarding housing. And I will be very quick on jobs. It's true that the tourism sector pays usually less than the average of our economy. Although the Portuguese figures in the last years showed that the tourism increased more than the average, but still is lower. One of the explanations, you mentioned several, and you too. It's not as attractive as other jobs. The time schedules are not good. Socially, is not the same thing to be a waiter in a restaurant or being a programmer or having a job in a startup. So socially, it's not the same. And it's a world of the labor force of women. And you have the gap of women and men, which is a more broad problem. But in the tourism sector, where we have more women than men, that also takes a role. So but I agree with you. The private sector, so the owners of the businesses, should be doing much more in what regards wages.
I see a question back here.
Actually, I have two questions. Hi, my name is Mario. I wanted to, first of all, compliment you on the intervention. I think it's very interesting. I can totally relate to what Alfonso said. Adolfo, excuse me.
Yeah,
I was here in the
it's normal.
90s and came back 5 years ago. And I'm just putting my questions into context. I used to say Portugal is the best kept secret. And I would go around as a 25-year-old to the States and everything, promoting the, at that time, Sheraton Algarve, which I did the opening. And I decided to come back 5 years ago with a gap of about 25 years. And I think one of the main reasons for Portugal doing what it's doing now, beyond the politics, is thanks to tourism. If real estate is what it is today, I think it should thank tourism in first instance. But that's a personal opinion, not based on stats, but that's how I strongly feel about tourism in Portugal. My question is very much linked, and there's one for Arnie and there's one for you. I'll ask Arnie first. When you talk about the North American market, having had 20 years of experience in luxury hospitality in Italy, we had hotels that were, having a scary up to 50-60% share of Americans. And we're talking hotels driving very high ADRs. I'm of the belief that that's a great opportunity in Portugal as well. As I said, it used to be the best kept secret, it no longer is, but it still has a lot to offer that is not known to the American. Can you relate to that? And do you think there's potential for, let's say, the more upscale segment to grow from the United States into Portugal? And I'll straight away ask my question to Adolfo as well. You were talking about, it's about the country as in a place to live, a place to work, a place to visit. I think one of the things that very often is lacking when we talk about promoting tourism is aggregating it with other industries and selling the gastronomy, selling the savoir-faire of a country, generally speaking. Do you think that is lacking in Portugal as well, and do you see opportunity in a more joined effort from that perspective? So I hope I wasn't too elaborate. Thank you.
You want to go first?
Sure. The short answer is yes. I think there's a great deal more opportunity in terms of attracting upscale visitors. And I mean, it's very interesting because, and there are some areas of Portugal, I think, that have sort of gotten into the consciousness of Americans that had not been there 5 years ago. The Douro Valley and the wine regions. I mean, I think there's a tremendous, if you look at wine regions in California, New Zealand, France, these are the premier destinations. I mean, these are where you will spend a lot of money to stay in a villa-like property. And it may be in the Douro Valley already. I haven't seen too much about that, but I think that's certainly an area that could become very attractive to those same upscale travelers. I think one area that is likely to really become more popular is the Azores Islands with the new direct service. It used to be you had to go through Boston. Now you can go directly from New York on 2 different carriers. And for me, I live in New York. It's much easier to go to the Azores than Hawaii. Much easier. And the experience is different. The islands are so different from one another. I'm really impressed by the Azores, by the way. I'm going back in February. So I think there's a tremendous amount of potential. That's another area where, again, if you look at the beauty that's there, and you look again at the average daily rates and what Hawaii hotels are getting, there's a lot of wealth on the East Coast that can go there. And Sheree was talking about Madeira, which I haven't been to. So I don't know if that's yet another one, but there's plenty of opportunity, I think.
I cannot be quoted on this, but Azores is the most beautiful place in Portugal. I cannot be quoted because I'm not from Azores. My area is Serra da Estrela, which is also beautiful, but Azores is in fact, so it's a nice place to come back. Regarding your question, our geographical main competitor is Spain. It's our neighbor. And if you realize, every country in the world receives the visit of Spain every day, either because it's in Formula One, or in tennis, or in fashion, or in movies, cinema, or in gastronomy. Spain is everywhere because they are good in a lot of stuff which is not related to tourism, but creates an image of a country. So Portugal, it's not as big, and it was not as influential, and somehow we had that gap of knowledge, so we were a very well-kept secret. We are not a secret anymore, but we still don't have the same international capacity to highlight the other parts of our skills and our way of living in our gastronomy, our universities, and etc. So I agree with you that we lack a strategy that can combine the Portugal brand rather than the touristic destination of Portugal. It's not easy because it's very hard in public policies to combine different, in Portuguese we say chapels, so everyone owns their own portfolio. It's not easy, but I think I will get your contribution here on this. But in a lower level, I mean in the private business sector, we are seeing that cross-selling. Wines and hotels. The church and the roots, Catholic or Jewish or Christian, and open to tourism. They even have a bishop that has the role of having the tourism part of their tradition. Even the agriculture, the production, the way they go to the exhibitions outside to sell the Portuguese agricultural products is now also combined with the tourism sector. So in a lower level, I mean in the sense on the business side, we see a lot of interconnections, and hopefully it will be possible in the near future to have a more strong marketing regarding all those aspects. I agree with you. I will add, it's important, at least to me, that our universities are ranked highly, because it means that you can come here to study and to have a very good degree and a very good experience of life. So I would have that as well as gastronomy and other stuff as a very important thing to show the country of the future. That's why we brought Web Summit here, and we spent money from the tourism board. Web Summit is not tourism. Apart from the room nights, they stay here for that period of time. Okay, it's possible to understand that investment, but our investment in bringing Web Summit, at least when I was in charge, now the contract is different, so I cannot talk about that contract. But that time, this is crucial to precisely go to that direction, to show that we are the country of the next generations, where everything is booming and happening. It was in that sense that we wanted to go, but still, there is a huge gap. There is a huge way still to follow. But I think that you contact with daily with the tourist experiences that are becoming and built for tourists, and probably you can have an
Absolutely.
insight.
I have been working in Portugal and living in Portugal since 2015, and I've noticed that all of a sudden wine tourism or enoturismo is the topic that everyone's talking about now. And you will remember back when you were Secretary of State of Tourism, perhaps you guys were thinking about launching that as a national campaign, but it was nowhere near what it's been in the past 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one example, Mario, of what you were asking about, where we have this cross-sectionality of tourism and other sectors within Portugal. And as an American who's still back and forth between the U.S. and Portugal, I've noticed how with more wine tourists coming here, enjoying Portuguese wine, now going back home and demanding to have more variety of Portuguese wines in the supermarkets and wine stores there. So it's all anecdotal, obviously. I can't give you empirical data on exactly how this is working out. But just from what I am seeing on both sides of the Atlantic, there is an increase of wine exports to the U.S., and there's an increase of wine tours, people who are actually being labeled, or categories of tours actually coming to Portugal as wine tours and immersing themselves here in all of the beautiful wine opportunities that they have, not just in the continent, but also in Madeira and the Azores. Another point that was brought up was what is the National Tourism Board doing about getting people out of the city centers? And I think that was part of your question, Michael. from what I understand, and Adolfo can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a national tourism marketing strategy, and then each region also has their own independent tourism board, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes the messages aren't as consistent amongst all of those different players as I think that they should be to drive more people out into the rural regions. Wine tourism happens to be one of the factors that is getting people out of the city centers and into the rural areas, so that's working out very well. The issue that we run into sometimes as a tour operator, domestic management or destination management company, are finding lodging options in the rural areas where clients can not just go out for a day, but go out for multiple days at a time. Arnie mentioned what's going on in the Douro Valley now, and there are great properties that are either being built or rehabilitated in the Douro Valley that are suitable for the level of tourists that we were discussing earlier, the segment that we consider the most interesting to drive or be economic drivers out into the rural regions of the country.
I think we would all like to continue for a long time, but we have people waiting upstairs with drinks and food, and they have a time limit. So
May I just add about drinks? The U.S. Constitution was celebrated by the founding fathers with Madeira wine. But when we signed the Treaty of Lisbon, we celebrated with champagne. And this is ridiculous. And it was something that we started to change. And that's why Madeira is also, I like to tell this story because it's important to show how even these small gestures, we needed to understand how to promote what we have best. And now, of course, we celebrate with Oporto wine or Madeira wine or Azores. Pico Island has a very, very good wine, so you should taste it. So even in those kind of things, we tried to change for better. Yeah.
So our speakers will be available upstairs, so if we could all join them, and thank you.